Hello, I'm Myrna Lashley. This is number 0728, the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuff File program, number 0728. And coming up on this edition of the Stuff File program, you'll meet Brent J. Ludwig, who is the author of Those Who Would Be King, The People's Prince.
I wanted to write a work of commercial fiction that was engaging and exciting, but I wanted that book to deliver a message, and the message related to political, economic, and social development in sub-Saharan Africa. It had been inspired by reading a book called Death Aid by a woman named Dambisa Moyo, who's a PhD. She wrote an economic treatise on how foreign aid was impacting development negatively in Africa rather than having a positive effect.
Carla Brown knows that laughter is the best medicine. She is the national laughing champion for 2 years running, and she's also teaching something called laughter yoga. Who knew laughter was a competitive sport?
I found out from one of my students, hey, you should enter this competition. I hadn't heard about it. And I said, okay, well, I guess, because I'm not a very competitive person. I am laughing for the sheer joy of it, for the health benefits. And so I entered, and I surprisingly won. All those years of practicing laughter for no reason somehow made a difference. And then the next year, I decided to enter the American Laughter Championship again. And I won again, and I didn't even expect to. There were amazing people laughing in this event.
Stuart Nulman is in with another edition of Book Banter.
Ahoy! I'm Stuart Nulman, and Book Banter goes back over 280 years to learn about the tragic shipwreck of the HMS Wager from David Grann's latest #1 bestseller. So batten down the hatches, this will not be a pleasure cruise. We set sail soon on the Stuff File program.
And there's lots and lots of Stuff File news, and of course, an idiot of the day. The guest slater, the person who told you this was show number 0728, was Myrna Lashley, associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry at McGill University. She's also a warmly funny lady. Thank you very much, Dr. Myrna Lashley, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuff File program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. Barbie mania is taking the world by storm, including in Brazil, where Burger King is selling a sandwich with a bright pink sauce that looks like chewed bubble gum and has a smoky flavor, according to Burger King. The BK Barbie combo comes with a cheeseburger, a pink vanilla-flavored milkshake, a donut sprinkled with pink frosting, and an order of Ken's potatoes, which, are also known as fries. The combo is not expected to be offered in the United States. Well, thank heavens for small mercies. It would appear that Barbie mania is everywhere.
Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Ken.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie.
Well, the doll is plastic, and plastic will outlive us all. In a similar vein, you might not have it on your calendar, but August the 5th is National Mustard Day. Rather than celebrating with a hot dog or a burger smothered in the yellow condiment, the French's Company wants you to try mustard Skittles. Says Ro Chang, who is the marketing director at Mars, Skittles is always looking to inspire moments of everyday happiness and deliver unexpected ways for fans to experience the brand. She went on to say the new flavor combines their tangy mustard flavor with our iconic chewy texture to deliver this unique summer treat. Adventurous mustard lovers can try to win a bag of the candy through an online sweepstakes. I often have something to say at the end of each story. This time, it's just one word. Nope. Nope, 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 nope. Hong Kong's health minister, Professor Lo Chung-Mao, is urging public shaming as a remedy to unlawful tobacco use. Lo told a meeting of the Legislative Council's Health Service panel that cigarettes can harm the health of all of us. When members of the public see people smoking in non-smoking areas, we can stare at the smokers. Everyone on the premises can stare at that person. He believes this behavior would help create a non-smoking culture in the city. He also said authorities can use surveillance footage to crack down on smokers flouting the rules. Wow. Could you imagine if that tact was applied to some of the larger cities in the U.S.? I mean, yes, public smoking is hazardous to all of our health, even non-smokers, but there are some locations where staring at people will get you killed much faster. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, Trader Joe's announced on July 21st that it is recalling 2 types of cookies that may have rocks in them.
At Trader Joe's, we do things a little differently, and our customers hold us to a very high standard.
The almond windmill cookies and the dark chocolate chunk and almond cookies have been removed from the grocery chain stores and destroyed.
This is Dan Bain of Trader Joe's. We work hard to live up to the high standard you've come to expect of us.
The company says that those who had previously bought them can return them for a refund. The company urged, please do not eat them. The company didn't specify how the rocks came to be in the cookies.
We're so confident that you'll be happy with the products you find at Trader Joe's, we even have a distinctive guarantee. We've tried it and we liked it, but if you don't, just bring it back for a full refund.
Okay, to be fair, we here at the Stuff File program often have a lot of fun with audio drops at the expense of several corporations. But in all honesty, mistakes happen, and I do actually take Trader Joe's ads at their word. So I believe that they are and have been doing the right thing. Incidentally, check out a YouTube commercial for the grocer that actually rails against the idea of less staff in stores and self-checkouts. In a world where less is more in terms of service, Trader Joe's seems to have stepped up to right some of the service industry's wrongs. And I have put a link in on my social media so that you can see that ad for yourself.
Thanks for listening.
Anyway, let's get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Brent J. Ludwig is the author of the historical action-adventure novel, Those Who Would Be King, The People's Prince. He joins us via Zoom from Calgary. Hi, Brent.
Hey, Peter. How are you?
Just tickety-boo. Thanks very much for being on the program with us. Right off the bat, I have to ask you, when you started writing this book, who did you write it for? Because not only is it something that, as I described, is a historical action-adventure novel, it kind of teaches about democracy to a certain degree.
Yeah, so I decided back in 2011 when I first started writing the book that I wanted to write a work of commercial fiction that was engaging and exciting, kind of like, a Dan Brown novel where it's hard to put it down and moves really quickly. But I wanted that book to deliver a message, and the message related to political, economic, and social development in sub-Saharan Africa. And that's a lot to bite off, but it had been inspired by reading a book called Death Aid by a woman named Dambisa Moyo, who's a PhD. She wrote an economic sort of treatise on how foreign aid was impacting development negatively in Africa rather than having a positive effect. And basically her theory was that you had to cut Africa off from foreign aid so that she and her countries could stand on their own and would implement change necessary to avoid calamitous events in the future. And it was kind of controversial, and it was written by a PhD, kind of for PhDs. So I thought I could write a book that simplifies those principles, talks about democratic reforms that have been implemented over the ages, talks about colonialism, talks about a whole bunch of social issues, and delivers that message in a way that might potentially be spread much more broadly than a PhD economic treatise. And that was the whole idea behind the book.
So how did you go about, when you started writing the book, who did you think your audience was for this book, and also what age group?
So North America and Western Europe. I think that whenever there's a crisis in Africa, the Western world steps up and sends money, and very little of that eventually makes it down to the people who need the money. But that's another issue addressed in the book. Demographic are people just like you and me. Anybody kind of 30, 40 plus who has their heartstrings tugged at when there's a calamity in Africa and, has enough money to donate to some sort of a cause. I think that program or those ideas they're great and altruistic, but at the end of the day, do more long-term damage than good.
So what exactly is the story in Those Who Would Be King, the People's Prince?
In order to deliver that economic, social, and political message, I worked backwards to create a setting, a story that would support the delivering of that message. And I came up with the idea of the classic age-old switched at birth conundrum, where someone who was meant to be the crown prince of a country gets switched with a baby who is born into a slum, and the slum baby grows up in the royal palace thinking that he's going to be the next king of Malaisiland, and the royal prince gets raised with no parents as a ward, basically, of a shanty town. And eventually, 14 years later, that switch is discovered, and they pluck the kid who was meant to be king out of the slums and toss the king, who had spent 14 years living the life of one of the wealthiest individuals on the planet, throw him right into the street. And that sets the stage for the rest of the novel and the conflict and struggle for power.
Now, you say you started this novel 11 years ago, and politically speaking, just not in North America, but globally, politically speaking, the world has changed dramatically in the last decade or so. So I'm just wondering what thought you gave to the dynamics that we see in politics today and the divisiveness that we see on both sides of the aisle in almost every country.
Yeah, 100% correct. The world has definitely changed. The time frame for the book, however, has not changed. And I absolutely did go through it and update it, but the book ends, long ago, and so wasn't impacted as much by the change since I wrote the book and put it on the shelf after failing to get the big publishing house type contract. And so books 2 and books 3 will be more contemporaneous with the world today, and will, of course, be updated to reflect kind of the polarization I think you're referring to that we certainly see in the Western world, if not elsewhere in the world as well.
When you first started writing this book, did you always envision it as being a trilogy, or did that develop as you started writing the first book?
Now, that's funny. It's about the third time I've been asked this question, and it must be interesting to people if everyone's asking the question. No, I did not see it as a trilogy. I wrote the book, and my first editor, Stephen King's first editor, read it, and one of the few material comments he made was, or substantive comments that he made was, that's a pretty aggressive ending for a first-time author. Are you sure you want to end it this way? I know it's your book. Are you sure you want to do this? And I scratched my head. And I thought, maybe I need to create a little bit of hope. And so I wrote an epilogue to the book, which left the door wide open for book number 2. And book number 2 will do the same thing for book number 3.
Now, you deal, as you said, and we've discussed, you deal with a country in Africa. You deal with the domestic situation there and the political situation there. But there is also a parallel to what has been happening in North America with indigenous folks, both in the United States and Canada. Was that cognizant in your mind when you were writing this book, that you had this parallel thought going through your mind about what's happening here, not just only on a continent away?
Absolutely. My father was a mining engineer that dragged the family to remote communities all across this country, literally from the tip of Vancouver Island to the Northwest Territories to New Brunswick to Northern Ontario and everywhere in between. And of course, that means mines and towns are situated in remote areas with significant First Nations communities. And I've seen firsthand the sort of federal policies starting in the 70s when I was first old enough to understand what was going on right through to present day. And I see an evolution in the way First Nations and businesses looking to develop resources interact, cooperate, and work together. And I see an evolving in the way First Nations people want to take control of their own economic future and not just rely on the federal government for handouts. Like they're sick and tired of the way they've been administered in the past, and they want to take responsibility for their own destinies. And as soon as I read Dambisa Moyo's book about how aid was creating that state of dependency, I immediately saw the parallels between First Nations and the federal government doling out literally billions of dollars every year to administer First Nations people across the country, which has its foundation in the Indian Act from the 1800s. So I really do think that there's an evolution happening today in Canada and in North America that, we didn't even see or even think about as recently as the 1970s or the 1980s.
If you don't believe that handouts work, what would be the alternative? What do you think will work better?
Well, I should say you can read the book for those messages. But I do think that there are a number of different things that could be done that are relatively easy. There's land reform. There's no system in many sub-Saharan African countries of actual land ownership and titling. And so people don't have assets upon which to borrow in order to develop their farming and or their businesses. They can peg currencies to the US dollars rather than relying on the whims of foreign exchange markets. If they do that, it actually promotes investment because the investing entities aren't subjected to currency risk. If they want and or believe that democracy, and not all countries do, but if they, or people do, but if they wanted or believe that democracy is important, you can't just say, okay, you're no longer part of the British Commonwealth, have an election. You need the will of the people and the institutions to support democracy, or, as has happened in virtually every circumstance, democracy fails. And so those are just a few of the things. Corruption in Africa is a major problem that inhibits investment. And so getting tough on corruption, which every government says they're going to do, but very few actually do, is important to ensuring attractiveness to foreign capital.
As I said in the introduction, this is an action-adventure novel, but I would assume, just by talking to you, that you want people to enjoy this book, but you also want them to think.
Absolutely. It is meant to spur thought. It's meant for people to read and go, maybe democracy isn't exactly the way, at least in the short term, in sub-Saharan Africa. There are people, the subject country for the book in reality is a country called Malawi. And I traveled there about this time last year to basically make sure that I had the feel right. And I made many, many good friends. And on July 6th, I congratulated a few of my friends down there on Malawi Independence Day. That's their version of July 1st or July 4th. And my friends basically said, well, there's nothing to celebrate. We don't celebrate our independence down here because it's not a happy state. We were better off when we were under a dictator or as a colonial country rather than since we've been independent. And I just thought that was horrifically sad. But you have to think, our standards and our ideals aren't necessarily the answers in sub-Saharan Africa.
It's an interesting topic. It's an interesting book. And again, it's one that will make you think. The book is called Those Who Would Be King, the People's Prince. Brent, I thank you very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
I really appreciate your time too, Peter. Thank you.
Brent J. Ludwig, author of Those Who Would Be King, the People's Prince. You can go to my website at thestuffile.com to the page for this show, which is show number 0728, and you'll find links to Brent's site and also links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like. But the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/thestuffileprogram. You're listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, coming to you from Montreal, Canada, where we share the longest unprotected border in the world with the United States. Take that as a sign of extreme friendship or a warning.
And still to come on the program, we'll talk to the national laughing champion, plus Stuart Nulman is along with another edition of Book Banter. We have a Stuff File Idiot of the Day coming your way a little later on, and more Stuff File news right here, right now. On July 22nd in Switzerland, 100 Alp horn players gathered for the 22nd International Alp Horn Festival. You know Alp horns, right? Think Ricola commercials. Ricola, Ricola. According to festival founder Antoine Ziven, the competitors are judged on interpretation, musicality, accuracy, and rhythm. Said one participant, 85-year-old Marcel Henschos, "It's easy to play, but difficult to play it well." Wow, that's the description I would use for the bagpipes. Anyway, Marcel was joined by players from France, Germany, America, and Canada. The youngest competitor was 11 years old. 58-year-old Adolphe Zobrist from Bern, Switzerland, took the title for the 4th time. Said Zobrist, "It's my hobby and it's my passion. I've been playing since I was 12. It's the sound of the mountains." Well, suddenly my throat is clear. Moving right along, full disclosure for this next story. I'm a big fan of Amazon. I use them a lot, ordering a lot of items, and the extremely rare times, like maybe twice, that I've had a problem with any product purchase, they all had one thing in common. It was a supplier from China. So I take this next story as foretelling. Cindy Smith of Prince William County, Virginia, definitely did not, I repeat, did not order hundreds of headlamps, glue guns, and children's binoculars. But still, they showed up at her home in more than 100 boxes. Said Smith, "A lot of people thought I was weird. I would drive around with headlamps and glue guns in my car. I gave them to everybody I met." A Washington, D.C. television station, WUSA, looked into the situation for Smith and learned that sellers from China that need to get their merchandise out of Amazon's warehouses are just picking random addresses, according to an attorney who represents companies that sell on Amazon. They're just having them sent there because it's just cheaper for them to do so. Amazon said it has closed its account with this particular seller. You know, it's a good thing that the company was trying to offload seemingly harmless items like headlamps, glue guns, and children's binoculars. Could you just imagine if they were selling adult items? Cindy Smith would have to move. Police in Tilden Township, Pennsylvania are going bananas trying to figure out who was throwing frozen bananas from a truck on July 24th. Said Sergeant Peter Whitman, "We have had 5 vehicles traveling eastbound on Hex Highway, people traveling westbound threw frozen bananas and struck windshields and other car parts. One driver had her window down and was struck by flying banana debris. It's extremely dangerous," Whitman said. "This could injure, or worse, you could cause vehicle crashes by doing this." Well, did anybody check the obvious? Was there a vehicle going westbound that was driven by apes? This could be the beginning of an interesting film.
A planet where man is the lowest order of living things, and the superior beings are apes.
And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our next guest here on the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, Claremont, Florida police pulled Valerie Walford over for rolling through a red light late at night. As soon as the officer approached her car, she immediately began apologizing. She must have been Canadian. She then handed over her insurance card when asked for her driver's license. The officer asked where she'd been driving, and she said she just came from McDonald's and she was still eating the burger. The officer noticed the smell of alcohol and administered a sobriety test, which Walford allegedly failed. At the jail, Walford agreed to a breathalyzer, which showed she had nearly double the legal limit of blood alcohol. Well, gee, I almost feel her pain. You know those late nights when you really, really want something to eat and every major fast food restaurant are physically closed, but McDonald's has 24-hour drive-through service? It's just begging you to roll up in a car, even when, clearly, you shouldn't. Temptation cannot exist without the concurrence of inclination and opportunity.
I hit 10 golf balls in the woods, my driver's in there too. My best drive all day long was to the drive-thru.
Did somebody say McDonald's?
Anyway, let's get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program. Who knew that laughing was a competitive sport? Carla Brown, who has been the national laughing champion for 2 years running, recently finished first against competitors from Asia, Europe, and the Americas in the World Laughing Championship. Carla joins us via Zoom from California. Hi, Carla.
Hey!
Wow.
Great to be here.
It's great to have you here. You are the laughing champion, but more importantly than that, you do a lot of good work in helping people's well-being. So let's go there first. I mean, everyone knows that, laughter is the best medicine, but when did you put this into practice?
That is such a great question. So, I am a recovering serious person. I did not have one of those kinds of childhoods that people want to talk about was so great. That's the perception of it. But what it did for me is it somehow created that little seed in me that wanted to feel better, that wanted to feel more joy. And as I continued to progress with life, and things would get challenging, and I would continually feel stressed, I was having anxiety attacks, holding my breath, feeling scared of the world. As that continued to happen, some part of me was waking up also and saying, okay, there's got to be a different way. Like I see people outside of me having a good time, laughing, going on vacation. That goes on vacation and has fun. There's so much work to be done, right?
Right.
And I decided to try a different way. And I found the practice of laughter yoga way back in 2008. And my body went with it and my mind fought it for 4 years. But I just kept going with it. And after 4 years, there was a softening of the rigidity. There was an understanding that my practice stress response and my hypervigilance had become a habit in my nervous system and in my body. And I didn't have to live that way anymore. The circumstances which created those experiences in my body were not happening in my life anymore. I wasn't a child. I'm an adult here and now. And so the laughter kept working its magic on me. It kept healing me. And the byproduct was I became happier. I became more joyful. Things looked lighter. My body felt better. I started breathing more deeply. It just got better immediately.
Okay, but you said your body went with it, but your mind was your body went with it, but your mind was not necessarily complying, and it took 4 years. At any point during those 4 years, did you say, "Oh, this isn't working. I'm just going to give up"?
Every single time I did it. So, somehow I magically went to a teacher training and I became a trainer, and I was leading weekly classes and I was training other people to do this. All the while, my mind was looping the track. Oh, what are we doing? Oh, I cannot believe you're doing this again. Do you even know how ridiculous this is? Every single day. And when I would go to teach my classes, I would hear this voice, you can't do this. I don't have the energy. I don't want to do this. And within 5 minutes, just showing up, within 5 minutes, my body felt better. There was more oxygen in my brain, happy chemicals releasing, and I felt better instantly. And I just kept going with that. So yes, my mind was sharing because, of course, the mind has opinions, but my body just kept feeling better. And that's what kept rippling out into my experience until my mind just basically said, well, I guess this is what we're going to do. I still think it's ridiculous, but let's see how we can integrate this. It wasn't excited, but it worked with me. And now I'm integrated in it.
Okay, so as I said in the introduction, who knew that laughing was a competitive sport? When did you find this out, and how did you become part of this? And the fact that you've won 2 years in a row, that says a lot.
Exactly. So I found out from one of my students back in probably April of 2022, hey, you should enter this competition. I hadn't heard about it. And I said, okay, well, I guess, because I'm not a very competitive person. I am laughing for the sheer joy of it, for the health benefits. And so I entered and I surprisingly won. All those years of practicing laughter for no reason somehow made a difference. And then the next year, I decided to enter the American Laughter Championship again, and I won again. And I didn't even expect to. There were amazing people laughing in this event. And every time you win a national event, just like in the Olympics, you go to the world. And so the first time I went to the world, I was like this newbie, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, and what is this? And I can't figure this out. But the second time, I was able to hold it, right? And I was able to play. And there's a lot of improv in it. And I'm not an actor. I've never practiced any improv, but my body was having fun and playing, and I was laughing, and all these many different types of laughter came out of me. Rolling on the floor laughter, diabolical laughter, sexy laughter, locking your keys in the car laughter. All of these silly simulated things became this real experience of laughter and joy in my body. And the people who were voting were all the participants, and I was voted as the champion.
Okay, back up 1 second. Locking your keys in the car laughter?
Yeah, so you're essentially in this practice, and I call it a practice intentionally. In this practice, you are using laughter. I use laughter as a tool to manage stress, to stop the flow of adrenaline and cortisol, to help feed my body, to relax me so that I can figure out what I need to do, not to completely get dysregulated and overwhelmed. So when you're practicing locking your keys in the car laughter, you're kind of laughing at yourself because obviously something happened, you made a mistake, you had a moment, and then all of a sudden your keys are inside and you're outside and the door's locked, right? And so could you just laugh at yourself what did I just do? Right. And you feel the frustration through, but you don't get stuck in the frustration. You don't let it govern the rest of your day and be the thing that you focus on the rest of the day. You just let it move through all right, I locked my keys in the car. I hate it when this happens. And it does happen, and it's temporary, and we move on.
Okay, so how do you deal with, for lack of a better term, the Debbie Downers in your life? Or conversely, how do those people deal with you?
Well, I don't have many Debbie Downers in my life at this point, having practiced this for 15 years. People know that I am a laughter professional. People know that I use laughter to manage my stress levels and to manage hard things. But the other thing, just to bring into this, is I'm also a grief yoga teacher. I'm a grief counselor. And I had a year where my best friend and my mother passed in the same year. And it was a lot of emotion. And I had trained my body to even laugh when there was sadness, right? To move the energy, to not hold it locked in my body. And so in essence, I started crying, and then like involuntarily because I was sad, and then my body would just start laughing. We have a laughter exercise called crying laughter. And I found that there was something deeper that I wanted to unlock inside of me. And that's where the grief yoga came in. That's where I started studying that practice. So now what I bring to the table is the full range of emotions, which we all have as humans, but many of us don't allow ourselves to feel. And so the depth of our joy, the depth of our love is also the depth of the loss and the grief we're going to feel when something in our life leaves. And so the people in my life, to answer your question, who are Debbie Downers, they're more people who recognize that I've got tools that could possibly work for them. And those that still choose to have me in their life because they know that my life is going to be full of joy and laughter, and I'm real and I'm authentic. I'm going to call it like it is, but could we meet it with a little breath and laughter and silliness and play to just bring some equalization and balance into our lives? And so those people, if they're in my life, it's because they know that there's something they can learn. And exactly the same with them. If there's something I can learn from people, I'm always going to learn, because we're always learning and growing. But those Debbie Downers, they don't seem to hang around because they have probably a lot of judgment for me, or they want to learn what it is I'm doing.
Well, speaking of judgment, what about those situations where people say, you're laughing inappropriately, or you're, laughing in church, or for instance, or laughing at a funeral, or that kind of thing?
100%. 100%. I've had that happen many, many times. And so the more that I've cultivated this life of laughter, I have learned, I've taught my body, there's a time to honor a space of mourning. All right. And I'm not going to be laughing at a funeral unless a memorial service is calling the person who passed, or the people who are coming together to celebrate it have brought the joy, the levity into the space. Because laughter actually is, I like to use it as a phrase of it's like medicine for our soul. It helps to meet the parts that are suffering. It helps to break the energy up. It helps us to feel better because it gets us breathing and those happy chemicals release. And then we can start to equalize and normalize. However, this is a very uncomfortable experience to happen in your body. Laughter for most people happens in their mind. If something is funny outside of them, they laugh. If they go to a comedy show and they find it funny, they laugh. That is a decision we make in our mind. Okay, that's funny, I can laugh. So if our laughter is also always based on decisions we make about something outside of us that is funny, especially in this world today, nothing is going to be funny for me in my life. Nothing would be funny, and I would never be laughing. And my body would be starving of happy, fun experiences that felt good. And so moving back to somebody who's judging what I'm doing, if I'm in a situation that is not my stage, that is not my space, I am going to totally respect what is going on, and I'm going to keep my practice internal. So I'm not letting someone's heaviness completely wreck the rest of my day, week, month, or year. However, if someone is in my space and they say, this is stupid, I will say, you are right. This is ridiculous. This is completely off the Richter scale, right? And it is also a powerful practice. And if you want to invite yourself to feel a little bit differently, I encourage you to just put your judgment aside and let yourself feel good. And if you never want to do this again because you have decided this is stupid and ridiculous, that's fine. No problem at all. But when we go into situations and we bring our discomfort through laughter, because there are many people that get so overwhelmed, so stressed out, so sad, and the way that they release might not be through tears, which we've all decided collectively tears are appropriate at a memorial service, but laughter is not, right? Laughter and tears release the same chemicals in our system. They're both a release. It's just that tears have been deemed more acceptable and laughter hasn't. So what I recommend for someone who has this experience that they just seem to laugh in inappropriate moments, don't shut yourself down from the laughter. Take it to a place where you can feel safe to let it move through. And then connect with the people that support you in that expression of your grief, of your discomfort, of your anxiety, so that eventually you can begin to transform it, and then it just doesn't take over in situations where you can be judged for it.
Great words of advice from a recovering serious person. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. By the way, are there 12-step programs for recovering serious people? Because I think there should be one.
You know, I haven't found any yet, and perhaps that's something I should start to create, because I will tell you, the commitment that we have to the stress and the overwhelm, the fear, the worry, the anxiety, like we're so committed to solving it, we're so committed to fixing it, can be the very thing that feeds it. Unless we step out of that paradigm and recognize, wow, this is just a big cosmic joke. I keep sticking myself into these stressful, awful situations and want to make other people and myself wrong. There are a lot of tools that I have to offer. So thanks for the idea. That might be down the pipeline next.
Excellent. Carla, thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so honored. Thanks, everyone.
That's one happy lady. That's Carla Brown, the national laughing champion who teaches laughter and grief yoga. You can go to my website at thestuffile.com to the page for this show, which is show number 0728, and you'll find links to Carla's site. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Got something for the mailbag? Drop Peter a line. He'd love to hear from you. Send your email to mailbag@thestuffile.com. And remember, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's mailbag@thestuffile.com. Or catch up with him on Twitter or Facebook. There's more Stuff File coming your way in just a few moments.
Hey, how would you like to become a patron of the Stuff File program? It's easy to do. By going to patreon.com and becoming a patron, you help to make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. And if you become a regular patron, as a Patreon reward, I'll share with you an electronic version of my book, Great Conversations, my interviews with two men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. You've heard me say on many occasions about the myriad of celebrities I've had the chance to talk to that are contained in my book, which is published by Bear Manor Media. You've also heard me mention that some of the celebrities in my book, and many others, can be heard on our page at patreon.com. If you've been on the fence about joining Patreon, let me try to pull you over to our side. Join Patreon and claim your copy of Great Conversations, my interviews with two men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. Sign up at patreon.com/The Stuff File program.
Coming to you from Canada, a place where fighting is frowned upon, unless it's on an ice rink. This is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. It's time to crack a spine. The Stuff File presents Book Banter with Stuart Nulman. Once again, here's Peter Anthony Holder.
And here he is, bobbing along on the bottom of the beautiful briny sea, Stuart Nulman. Hello, Stu.
Ahoy, Peter. And you saw Bedknobs and Broomsticks, didn't you?
Oh, yes, I did.
So did I. Way back in 71.
Absolutely.
But on this edition of Book Banter, Peter, we're not going to go to the beautiful briny sea. We're going to talk about a shipwreck, which is now a book called The Wager by David Grann, which is now one of the most popular nonfiction books so far this year. And let me tell you something. After you finish reading David Grann's latest #1 bestseller, The Wager, about the tragic shipwreck of a British Navy vessel during the early 1740s and its aftermath, there is one dominant impression that you get. This is like Mutiny on the Bounty, but gone very, very wrong.
But wait a minute.
However, this...
You say it would be Mutiny on the Bounty, only it went horribly wrong. Are you saying Mutiny on the Bounty ended well?
Well, I mean, they ended up in Tahiti, and I don't think the consequences were as tragic as what happened on the Wager.
The first word is mutiny.
Yeah.
That does not end well.
Well, let's put it this way. The Wager, what happened on the Wager makes Mutiny on the Bounty look like the shipwreck of the SS Minnow.
Okay.
Let me expand a little bit further.
Okay.
So this 3-year maritime saga, like I said, it wouldn't be. The book is fascinating and to read because the story is chillingly true. Now, Grann, whose previous #1 bestseller was Killers of the Flower Moon, uses his ability to diligently dig through contemporary accounts and documentation, and he's produced another piece of hidden history that richly deserves our attention. This horrifying story takes place during a 3-year period between 1740 and 1743, when Britain and Spain were involved in a pitched battle for the supremacy of the seas. And then there was a 3-ship British Navy armada, which included the Wager, which was sent on a secret mission along the Atlantic coast of South America in pursuit of a Spanish naval galleon that reportedly was filled with a king's ransom worth of treasure and riches. But however, something went terribly wrong during this expedition. After surviving the treacherous crossing of both the Strait of Magellan and Cape Horn, the Wager encountered stormy waters along the coast of the Patagonia region, which is now Argentina, and ended up being shipwrecked. The survivors made their way to a rather uninhabitable island located in the Spanish-held territory of South America that they named Wager Island. And life for the survivors on Wager Island was just as hellish as it was aboard its namesake ship. The men were ravaged by starvation and disease, especially scurvy, which Grann describes its harrowing effects in graphic detail. And under the command of the incompetent David Cheap, that's his name, David Cheap, proved to be less an effective leader on land than he was at sea. And when he shot and killed one of the members of the Wager's crew, it proved to be too much for the rest of the men, who rallied together to mutiny against Cheap, leave him stranded on the island as punishment, and then craft a longboat from the damaged remnants of the Wager and make that long, arduous journey back home to England. Now, when the boat arrived on the coast of Brazil in 1742, about a year and a half after the Wager set sail from England, the colonists found 30 men who were emaciated from starvation and near death from a terrifying ordeal with an even more terrifying story to tell. And 6 months later, that story was countered when another ramshackle boat, this time containing 3 castaways, arrived on the coast of Chile to say that the 30 survivors from the Wager were actually mutineers who should face an admiralty court-martial and be hanged from the highest shipyard arms for their crimes. But the thing is, the Wager is another fun example of revealing a piece of history that has been left buried and forgotten for so many decades, and then is dug up for new generations to learn about the lessons and long-term effects that a tragic event can have upon the future of a country or society. In the case of the HMS Wager, it's how a lack of discipline and leadership almost scuttled Britain's reputation as a naval power. The course of British history might have changed, and not for the better, if those lessons had not been learned during that chase for a treasure-laden Spanish galleon back in 1740.
So it was part of a 3-ship armada, as you said?
Yes.
And did anybody take bets on the Wager being successful?
I don't think there were any bets taken, not after what I read. And I bet you gambling and wagering was like illegal and met with a few lashes of the cat o' nine tails.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it went on.
Well, the British Navy was pretty strict and got much stricter after what happened on the Wager.
Anyway, the book is?
It's called The Wager by David Grann. It's published by Doubleday, and it's $39.95.
And dare I ask, what other books would you recommend within this genre?
Well, first, I do want to recommend David Grann's previous bestseller, Killers of the Flower Moon, which was about a murder case involving several members of the Osage Indians, who were a very wealthy tribe in Oklahoma in the early 1920s, which garnered the attention and became the very first case of a nascent FBI. And it's going to be a movie. The movie's going to be released this October, directed by Martin Scorsese. The other book I recommend is a maritime saga. It's called The Wreck of the Doomaroo. You heard of Lowell Thomas. Have you, Peter?
Yes.
Okay. Well, besides being a well-known broadcaster and the voice of movie-tone newsreels, he was a prolific journalist and author, and back in the late 20s, early 30s, he was commissioned by Doubleday to write a series of adventure books, which included With Lawrence of Arabia, And in 1930, he published The Wreck of the Doomaroo, which was about a cargo ship. In 1918, that was doomed from the start. It was terribly constructed. It was a wooden ship. It was carrying explosives and gasoline. It was hit by lightning. The ship sunk. 32 survivors got on a lifeboat that was, can only hold 20 at best, and were adrift, in the sea for 3 weeks with virtually no food, and they had to resort to cannibalism. And this book, of all the books he wrote for this Lowell Thomas Adventure Library in the late 20s and early 30s, this book, The Wreck of the Doomaroo, is the one that's the most popular and still has a lot of impact with readers. So I guess that makes that saga makes the Wager and the Bounty look even more so like the SS Minnow.
I'm sure there was someone on that life raft who said, "Oh God, who gets to eat Carl?"
It's a Monty Python sketch with when they discuss who's going to get eaten first.
Anyway, this week's book is.
It's called The Wager by David Grann. It's published by Doubleday, and it's $39.95.
And by the way, David Grann sounds like someone who's just really cheery at parties.
Oh. His other books deal with true crime, actually. So, I guess so. I guess he's a real fun conversationalist.
Yeah. None of his books are going to be made into musicals, I'm assuming.
No, I can't see The Wager. Stick with HMS Pinafore. Put it that.
Yeah. Anyway, again, how can people find you, and where can they find you?
Well, they're not going to find me in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean on some ramshackle boat. You're going to find me in the pages of the Montreal Times, www.mtltimes.ca, or on my blog, www.stuartnulmansgrapevine.wordpress.com.
Thank you very much, Stu.
You're welcome, Peter, and don't be a landlubber because it's time to cast off.
I will never leave the land. Stuart Nulman with another edition of Book Banter here on the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
The Stuff File.
And we're just about a racetrack for this edition of the Stuff File program. We do have an Idiot of the Day coming your way in a few moments, but first, a few more Stuff File news stories. In Glastonbury, Connecticut, 11 boats took off from the Seaboard Marina on July 12th. Actually, correction. Make that they took off with the marina. A 200-foot section of dock with 11 boats attached broke off and started floating down the Connecticut River, later passing through Cromwell, Portland, Middletown, and Haddam. One part of the errant dock was still floating downstream the next day. Officials said it was likely that flooding in Vermont had caused the high water to set the structure free. Teddy Charton of Middletown said, "I got a call about my boat that was floating down the river. It ended up all the way down in Chester. Eventually, all but one of the boats was recovered." Well, as long as none of those boats included an ark, I think we're okay. A British Columbia real estate agent has been fined $20,000 after being caught on camera drinking milk straight out of the jug at a home he was showing. A consent order released by the BC Financial Services Authority says Mike Rose was alone in the home in Kamloops, BC in July last year as he waited for his clients who were interested in buying the property. Rose went to the refrigerator to find water, but instead swigged some milk straight from the container, which he then put back in the refrigerator. The owners of the home saw him drinking the milk when they reviewed footage from a surveillance camera, then confronted him about it 2 days later. Rose, who apologized for his actions, was told he wasn't welcome in the home, and his clients replaced him in their purchase of the property. Rose said in the consent order that his behavior was out of character and he was unusually dehydrated at the time because of a new medication, as well as being under considerable stress. Rose, who is now working at a different brokerage, agreed to pay a disciplinary penalty of $20,000 to the authority for conduct unbecoming and $2,500 in enforcement expenses. Wow. Being fined $22,500. Bet he's crying over guzzled milk.
Milk.
And boys and girls, it's that moment you've all been waiting for. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. The Stuff File presents the Idiot of the Day.
Just last week on this show, we had a similar situation, but from the police's point of view, this one is closer to home. Here's a word of advice, by the way. If you're going to do something illegal, at least have the forethought to not do it in front of the popo. A 19-year-old man from Columbus, Georgia, was arrested for allegedly doing donuts in his vehicle in front of a police station. In a video posted on the Columbus, Georgia Police Department's Facebook page, surveillance footage depicted a vehicle doing the dangerous driving stunt in front of police headquarters. The vehicle was allegedly driven by 19-year-old James Brian Brown, one of a few who were involved. Brown was charged with 2 counts of reckless stunt driving. Now, why? Oh, why? If you're going to do spinning donuts with your car, would you do it right in front of police headquarters, a building that not only is filled with cops, but also has a plethora of surveillance cameras? Well, one reason, and one reason only. You're an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0728. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestufffile.com, and once again, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0728. Email me at peter@thestufffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook and Twitter as PA Holder, and don't forget to check us out on patreon.com, where you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including KDXRadio.com, TrueTalkRadio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, WLSL-LP-FM in Dade City, Florida, KZZH-LP-FM in Eureka, California, CKUW-FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. If you were listening to this at the same time as watching The Wizard of Oz and listening to Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon, well, it's a waste of electricity. There are some things you just can't multitask.